Hello everyone, this is Jessica with Black Travelers Network, where we provide trips that focus on the Black experience in different parts of the world, and we cover news stories that happen in different parts of the African diaspora. So welcome. Before we get into today's story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button as we aim to provide you with the latest and greatest news from different parts of the African diaspora. This first story comes to us from All Africa, allafrica.com, and the story is Rwanda. President Kagame shocked by high number of churches in Rwanda. He says, quote, 700 churches? Are these boreholes that give people water? End quote. Asked President Paul Kagame when he heard that more than 700 churches had been closed down by authorities. Quote, I don't think we have as many boreholes. Do we even have as many factories? But 700 churches, which you even had to close. This has been a mess. The closure this week by the Rwandan Governance Board, RGB, was meant to tighten rules on registration and functioning of churches in the country in the face of rising cases of fraud and security concerns. Religious and rights groups said the closure amounts to infringement on the right to worship, but the government says the crackdown is timely in the face of thousands of mushrooming churches in the largely Christian country. President Kagame, while officiating at the closure of a 4-day national leadership retreat on Thursday, commented on the ongoing operation, saying that he was surprised by the large number of churches. He pointed out that had there been proper planning, the situation would not have gotten to a level where the government had to close churches. He said that Rwanda has not reached a level where it needs all these churches, noting that such a big number of churches is suitable in bigger and developed economies that have the means and the systems to sustain them, which is one of the two scenarios such a development can be explained. Quote, the second scenario is that you will find such a mess of churches in societies which have nothing like ours for different reasons. In Rwanda and Africa, there are those who want to see us in such chaos. When authorities intervene and stop them, they lament that it is a human rights abuse. People should have a right to worship in whatever church they say, said Mr. Kagame. He, however, said that Rwandans do not have the luxury and means to sustain such churches, supporting the move to shut them down. Loopholes. The heads of Pentecostal churches, which are the most affected, have lamented that the decision to close churches, which they said was hastily implemented. Quote, we needed more time to put things in order, and later on an inspection would determine which churches to close, said Bishop Lilane Mukabedej of Mountain of Hope, pointing out that some of the closed churches can meet the standards given a grace period. Observers say the crackdown could set back planned investments which faith-based organizations are making, including in the media, schools, and hospitals. It is suspected that a recent case involving Amazing Grace FM, a Christian-run radio station accused of airing a hateful sermon against women, put churches in the spotlight. In the sermon aired on January 29th, 2018, a pastor, Nicholas Nyabokora, vented against women, calling them, quote, evil and against God's plan. The radio station has since been temporarily closed and fined roughly about $2,300 for undermining state security and Rwandan culture. RGB, which registers faith-based and civil society organizations, says there are loopholes in the current law which were deemed not strict enough to address the issues that emerged after it's enacted in 2013. Anastasia RGB Chief Executive Officer said the law allowed churches to start and register later, while preachers underwent no licensing process, as there are no specific requirements regarding who should practice, standards for places of worship and management, among other things. Quote, the same way other professions require some training or qualifications, it should also apply to preachers to avoid people who call themselves bishops, pastors, or apostles when they have not acquired it through training, said Ms. Sheka. RGB officials say this was partly to blame for the several malpractices and internal wrangles that characterize churches and faith-based organizations in the country. Okay, so just to kind of put this into context a little bit for you, the estimated population as of 2015 for the city of Kigali was roughly about 1.1 million people, okay? So I think that's important to understand in terms of getting a handle on how many people are in the city that would require a number of different places of worship. And just to give you a little bit more perspective on the population, if you're in the United States, think about if you lived in San Jose, California. San Jose, California's population is a little bit more than 1 million people. Or if you lived in Dallas, Texas has a population of roughly about 1.3 million people. So it's a little bit bigger than the city of Kigali in terms of population. But if you think about it, population-wise, Kigali's population falls in between the amount of people you could find in San Jose, California, or the amount of people, a little bit less than the amount of people you can find in Dallas, Texas. Imagine either one of those cities having more than 700 churches. And I think the official number of how many churches they closed was roughly about 720 churches. And that's not even all of the churches. There are other churches that are in Kigali. And so as a result, for them to decide to close that many churches was a decision that was made based off of the ability to sustain that many churches in that city. And so I think it's very admirable that the president looked at it from a systematic ability as to whether or not the city was large enough to sustain that many churches. I also appreciate the fact that he asked the question, do we have 700 factories? You know what I mean? So it's like putting it into perspective of how many churches is really too many. And so I'd like to hear from some of you guys, like think about where you live, the city you live in. What's the population compared to the amount of churches? Do you think your own city has too many churches or too few churches, depending on where you live? Is that something that you feel that before a church gets built or open, that there ought to be some sort of assessment within the community as to whether or not the community or the city deserves or can sustain another church opening? And I gotta tell you, I'm a little bit on the fence, because I feel like here, at least here in the United States, oftentimes if you close a church, you're closing a business. If you close a church, you're closing a community outreach center. If you close a church, you close a place where many families gather and practice their religion. And you can find several different churches in neighborhoods. And so I want to hear from you guys. Tell me what you think and drop your comments below. I would like to tell you that you can check the description box to find out more details about our upcoming trip to Rwanda. And Definitely ask us questions, send us an email if you're interested in knowing and learning more about our trip. So thank you guys for listening, and until next time.